Hello, I'm Dylan Dowling, and this is my Springboard presentation making a module for Dungeons and Dragons. So, what is my project specifically, and what is Dungeons and Dragons? Because some of you might not know. My project is to write and illustrate a module for Dungeons and Dragons, and Dungeons and Dragons is a role-playing game created by Gary Gygax, and that's this handsome fellow over here. It is, in simplest terms, where you get your friends together and one of them plays as the dungeon master, which is like the head of the game. They're in charge of running everything. Those other players will create a character that they will act as, and the dungeon master will lead them through an adventure, and then they get loot, and that's the game. So, why this project? Why did I choose to do this one? Well, I have a long history with Dungeons and Dragons. I've been playing it for several years, and I started playing it with my dad. We started in first edition and moved up to the current edition, fifth edition, and this is a picture of our book collection right now for all of the published books for fifth edition. And I've always been interested in writing these stories because I think they're pretty neat, and I think a lot of the creatures in Dungeons and Dragons are pretty fun to mess around with. But I haven't really had the time or an opportunity to put in the effort consistently to make one of these before. I've always just kind of made a quick map or a quick description of an NPC, but this project allowed me to go very in-depth and have a lot more fun with it than I normally would. So, what is a Dungeons and Dragons module, and how would you make one? Well, a Dungeons and Dragons module, like I kind of touched on earlier, is a book. It's a guidebook for the dungeon master to lead the players through the adventure. It is in charge of providing the names and descriptions of locations, important people your players might want to meet, the enemy of the entire place, what's the goal, that kind of stuff. And these are just some of the modules that came to mind when I like to think about. These are the older ones from first edition, but they're not all that big. They're usually they can be 15-ish or short or longer pages, but they're not very large. So I should go through, I think, my process for how I would write one of these things. How do you start? So I took this idea from Mr. Bennett, who showed it to me when I first started in this school, and that is an idea dump. And you usually spend 10 to 20 minutes, I did 30 to 40 minutes, of writing everything that comes to mind down. All the places, the people, the traps, the rooms, anything you can think of, you just write down. You don't worry about spelling, you don't worry about grammar, you just get it on a page. And then after that, you go into my next step, which was forming a general plot. So the general plot is vague. It's supposed to be very vague. The most in-depth you should get is maybe your location. It's just, where are you? What are you going to do, you think? And what are they fighting or going after? Very, very simple. And then you narrow all of that down into more specifics. So where are we staying? It starts in a town. What are we doing? We're going to get people who got kidnapped. Who are we fighting? I decided to go with the Kuatoa, which are just fishmen, basically. Imagine a guy with grayscaly skin and a fish head, and you're not very far off. So narrowing down the ideas is what took up almost my entire time, this whole project. I severely underestimated how long it would take to write all of this stuff because I've never done this before. But that was the fun part. So while I was narrowing down the ideas over the course of the first month, I ended up with 4 or 5 now different overall ideas for where the module could go. And I settled on the one I just used as an example, where people are being kidnapped from a town and taken by the Kuatoa to be used in a ritual. Very simple. So I narrowed that down. And then after that, you move into the details. So there's these steps I think are the biggest. And they can be kind of merged together. They get muddied a bit. But overall, at the end of these 2 steps, you should be almost done. So the details, I think one that firmly lies in the details would be room descriptions, which are just, you have your map, right? You have a map of the area, and you have rooms in it, or you have areas of it. The room descriptions are what is in that area, maybe what can you do or what can you find. That kind of stuff belongs in the details. And then you do the finishing touches. Now, I considered art in the finishing touches area because I made this mistake when I first started writing it. I did the art before I figured out the story, and that led to a lot of pieces that I really liked not fitting anywhere because I didn't have them in the story anymore. So I was focused solely after that on getting all of the writing done. So I put art in the finishing touches, despite it being a very large endeavor. It's not the biggest part, but it's certainly something that you would like in there. So, and all of this is important, but there's one thing that I think a lot of people forget about, which is you're writing this module for other people to go through it. And it's not like writing a movie script. That's a trap a lot of people fall into. They write more of a movie script or a screenplay when you don't know what your players are going to do. They could go completely off course. They could do something completely unexpected. And usually that's the fun of the game. But a lot of new people get very upset or get very confused or got caught off guard by it. So I wanted to see how my module would go up against other people. So I had a very unique opportunity, I think. I managed to get a group of 4 new people to Dungeons and Dragons who did not mind being my guinea pigs, basically. They were going to test my module and see if everything held up. And as you can see by the title of this, some things went wrong and not as expected. So, how did they like the adventure? Overall, they thought it was a very fun adventure. And I believe they thoroughly enjoyed parts of it, but I had to make changes because it was a little complicated for new players, which is what I want my module to target. I want it to be something that you can get new people into Dungeons and Dragons with. So the biggest hurdle, I think, was the beginning. I had written a part where you need to interrogate a few people and they will give you a description of how they were attacked or how somebody they knew was kidnapped and what direction the perpetrators went. And you're supposed to get all those directions, put them on a map that you can find in the town, and it will show you the location, like the general area of where the Kuatoa are, where the people are getting taken to. But they missed the locations and the directions, and they focused a lot more on the method, which led them to wasting a lot of time and spending way more time on this than they needed. So I figured that needed changing. And then after that, when they got to the location, it ended up being a little complicated for them because they had trouble visualizing everything that I put in there. And I had made it a bay area with a rocky ridge on the right side with multiple entrances. But they were only able to kind of process or understand a few of the entrances, and they couldn't quite figure out how everything connects. They went down a cave, came out one of the other ones, and thought it was completely separate when it just reconnected back to the bay. So that was, I think, too complicated. So the changes that I made to that was I took out the intro mystery. I made it a much more straightforward and simple. You go to the town, they tell you something's happening, they tell you where to go, and they'll pay you for doing it. And that's straightforward, that's hard to derail, and that gives people a lot of time to talk about stuff and still have fun, but it inevitably gives them a place to go. And then the dungeon, I didn't have to change nearly as much. I just rearranged it so that it was more linear, a lot more of this room to the next to the next. You don't have to worry about mazing around or trying to figure out where does this connect and all that. So I changed it a lot. And that took just about the last month up to this presentation. I've been working on that. And the project as a whole, how did I think it went? I think it went well. I think I could have done some things better. I could have focused a bit more on the writing, especially in the beginning. And I feel bad that I didn't get to do nearly as much art. Right now I only have pieces that are in progress or I've thought of, but I don't have anything completely done to put in yet. So But overall, I really like where I'm going. I've gotten really attached to this project, and that leads to things going forward. I am going to continue this module because I want it to be great. I want to finish it. It's something I want to do now. And I've done the most time consuming part, I think. I think now that the writing's over, I have a lot more things to focus on. So I'm going to hopefully there should, if I got everything worked out, there should be a link somewhere, either in the description or provided or something near maybe how you got into my presentation. There should be a link that will take you to my Google Doc that has all of the information on it, my whole module written out on it. I'm going to be putting pictures and maps as I'm done them there. I'm going to keep updating it. And eventually, I want to move this module to something more professional because I don't think Google Docs is very good as a final platform to have everything on. I think there are better things out there. I just need to look for them. I need to put more time into it. But that's where I'm sitting right now with this project. So thank you guys for coming. If this got you interested in Dungeons and Dragons, great. I hope you keep pursuing that. I think it's an amazing game. Yeah, thank you for coming.